Kia ora crafters and welcome to card making. I'm Heidi and today we're going to make those. We're focusing on Father's Day cards today. So we've got one here that's basically triangles. This is it without the sentiment on it. So you can see that essentially it's just 4 triangles and then we've put some more pretty on top. And this one is some strips. So again, that's it with the sentiment on it. And this is it. It's probably a little bit hard to see because it's brown on brown. I didn't think about that with the camera, sorry. But it's just essentially strips of paper. So we're going to start with our triangle one today. What I've used for these ones is a piece of double-sided paper. If you don't have that, it's not a problem either. So you just get 2 that you think work well together. And I've cut them, so I've got these card bases, they're just a plain craft card base, but make it out of whatever you've got at home. And whatever colour you've got, if you want a nice bright red one, then go for it. So essentially what it is, as always, I've cut my initial starting piece of paper down to just under the size of the card base, which for me, on these ones, is 9 by 13 centimetres. But you fit it to whatever card base you're making. So you start with your piece here. As I said, mine's double-sided. If not, start with 2 exactly the same size. And I'll go over that in a moment. With this one, ruler and a craft knife or scissors. If you've got scissors, I would recommend ruling a line first to cut. If you've got a paper trimmer or a small guillotine or whatever, then that will work too. Corner to corner, you carefully cut along, for me, the metal ruler or whatever you're using. So you see there, got that piece, got 2 large triangles. Now you want to turn it around. Oops, whichever way works for you. So you can cut it and piece it back together like a jigsaw. So just have it sitting there like it hasn't been cut. And then you go the opposite corners to cut. So hold it down so it's not going to move anywhere. And line that up as well. And again, carefully cut. Corner to corner. Oh, there we go. So we now have 4 pieces. If you're using 2 separate ones, then do exactly the same thing on both of them. So you just corner to corner, and then corner to corner, and the same on the second one. And then what you would do, so what I'm doing with this, so you see they're opposites. Turn whichever 2 you like over to face the other way. Or if you're using 2, then get 2 matching from each piece. So you might have the 2 long ones from this and the 2 short ones from that, for example. Okay, so then we get our card base, and it's pretty simple, like a really, really simple jigsaw. So you just set it out before you glue anything down or adhere anything down, just to make sure that it all actually goes back together properly, because, you know, sometimes these things happen. All right, so that looks like it's going to work together, really cool. Now, your choice of adhesive, glue, double-sided tape, whatever works for you. I'm going to go with liquid glue this time because it just gives me a little bit of wiggle room. So, which end is going to work better? Probably that end. I'm going to start with a long piece. Yep, glue doesn't want to work. You don't need a huge amount. I often find that more is not necessarily better. And because you've already set it out, you can eyeball it where you want it to be. So you line it up your sides and just gently press it down. Because you've got that liquid adhesive, you've got a little bit of wiggle room if you need to adjust it anyway. Right, and then remembering to swap over to the other side or a different piece if that's what you're using. Go on to your next one. And you'll notice it's not an equilateral triangle, so you do need to make sure that you get the right side onto the right adjoining piece. Sometimes a good idea is to take a photo when you've got it all set out before you stick anything down. Take a photo so you can refer back to that, which side goes where. And just carefully press those down and trying to do the best to make sure you meet them in the middle, so you've got that, it's neater. Yes, making sure I've got the right piece up the right way. Again, lining that up. And just carefully pressing that down. Oop. Right, and the last piece. The right way around? Yes, it is. So that just fits in there like a nice little jigsaw. Pretty simple, but pretty effective. So you see that's exactly like that one. And then if you want, you pop a sentiment on the top. I actually have a stamp set at home that says happy, so I cut around that. And you know, you can write it yourself. You could cut something out of a magazine, you might have a sticker, any kinds of things. Our second one we're going to do today is all about the scraps. I just dug into my little bucket of scraps, paper scraps. I just keep it on the side of my desk that I work on at home, and got out just a whole lot of little bits and pieces. Cut them all. I think these ones, just let me double check. Yeah, 2 centimetres wide. But cut them to whatever you would like. You might like fatter ones or thinner ones or whatever. And it's just a matter of lining them all up. I've left a gap in between. I found it easier to line them up that way, and it didn't matter if maybe my cutting was a little bit skew off on one of them. It was a little bit more forgiving. But some people like them, you know, right next to one another. Totally fine if that's what you'd like to do. So again, we get our card base. Now I've pre-cut all these bits, so you might want to pause your video now and go and cut your bits and pieces. So the idea is just get yourself a handful of bits and pieces that you like the look of how they look together, essentially. So you'll see that, which is easier to show, that one. I started with this piece here, so you line it up with that top corner. So, and don't worry about the length for now, because we'll cut around that later. You just kind of line it up there, so it's hanging off the edge of that top corner going up that way, like that. Right, now next one, we'll go with the plain green. So, I've got to remember how I did this now. You see I've gone down a bit further on that one there. That one goes to there. You skip the next one down a bit further. Yep. One on the other side a little bit higher. And try and sort of eyeball it so it's the same amount of difference, or the same, how would you put that, same variation between them, I guess. Okay. This is another fiddly bit actually, but it just requires a little bit of patience. Now then, I'm going to start doing it in the opposite direction, and you want to line that up. I haven't got it far enough. There we go. So that's kind of squared off against each other. So you see that one there lines up with the bottom of that one there. That means I might need to go there a bit further. So this is another one where you're eyeballing it really. There's probably a way of measuring it or numbering it so you get it all exact, but I found that just having a bit of patience and eyeballing it went perfectly fine. Right, and you'll see that there is hanging off both that way. It's hanging off both that way and there. Doesn't matter, just let it hang off and we'll fix it all up later. We're just working on the pattern at the moment. Finding, oh, nearly lost it, little bits and pieces here. Go. Press these down quite firmly, otherwise apparently they don't want to stay there. Right. I just need a tiny bit. I'm just going to rip that off, it won't stay there otherwise. It doesn't want to stay there anyway. Just sort of fill in the gaps around the edges really. Okay, so I'll carefully lift it off because I've glued it down to the surface I'm working on, and it's pretty much a hot mess, I think is the phrase. So then I generally leave it to sit and dry off a little bit, otherwise that happens, and then trim off around the edges, but so that you can see what I'm talking about. Give it a go now. Turn it over so the back is facing you. Just trim along the edges. Slow and careful. Fix that up in a minute. Holding my breath while I'm doing this. Yeah, let's wiggle a bit. Just wiggle that back. There we go. They're very gluey. I'm going to have to clean my scissors afterwards. So essentially, right, we're going to stick that back on because that ran away. All the way for that one. Okay. So there we go. We've made our pattern and we've filled in all the little bits at the edge. It's all glued down. Just keep pressing it until the glue actually dries. You can sit something on top of it, non-stick obviously, to help it dry flat, and then trim around the outside. If you want to put, if it gets gluey bits on the back and you want to put something on the back, just stick another bit of paper on. But I find a lot of people don't look at the backs of the cards anyway. So that one is the same as how that one's ended up, and you can see I've just popped a sentiment on there. But you can put it around that way, whatever takes your fancy. I hope you've enjoyed this session. Have fun making cards.